Wow, it looks like YouTube's a lot easier, actually. Let's see. You know what? I'll post it to Facebook that it's not working on YouTube. That's funny. Oh, wow. I think it is actually working. Remarkable. You know what?
I just posted on Facebook that the link is not working to go to the Zoom.
Oh, wow. I think it is actually working. Okay, good. So I'm just going to post to Facebook now on our Facebook and say, this morning's.
Yep, it's coming through on YouTube.
This morning's.
I'm going to switch to YouTube because it's a bigger screen for me. Yep, it's coming through on YouTube. Oi.
Elaine, turn your phone sideways. It'll be the same screen. And go to speaker view, not gallery view.
Okay, that helps. Okay, good. So.
And go to gallery view, speaker view, not gallery view. And
I don't know.
Okay, fine. So at least I posted a notice. Okay, good.
I'm gonna mute myself.
Okay, so let's see, who do we have here today with us? Who is here with us? Let's see, we have, oh, Carlos. What a nice surprise. Carlos, beautiful. Corey's here. And Warren and Helen. I didn't see Helen. Helen looks like she's invisible, but okay. Hey, Warren. Elaine is there, and Ed Hockman and Marty and Mickey. Good. Okay, so let's get started. Without much further ado, I'm excited to introduce you to a very, very special personality, to the Rebbe's father. You ready? And I'm going to do that right now. His yard site is this week. I'm going to share my screen. Share my screen. Bear with me. Okay, please just give me a thumbs up if you can see the video on the screen. You can see the video, Mick? Thank you. Good.
Go to speaker view, not gallery view.
We're good. Are we on YouTube too, I hope?
Rebbe's father, Rebbe Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, and his Rebbetzin Chana got married in the year 1900 in Nikolaev. 2 years after the wedding, 1902, the Rebbe was born. Und wie der Rebbe Chana erzählt, auf noch die Chassene, als 8 Jahre ist gesetzen, gelernt und geschrieben. Und sein ganzer Derech Halim und die Gewinn, versteht sich früher gut, wie ihr seht, ist alle Jahre in Nigle, wie das ist in Nigle, und danach die Jahre, wie sie in Kabul. Hat einmal gesagt, seien die in Moskau, als der Rebbe nicht verstehen, hat er gegeben die Klolim, und die Protein, die alle Jahre, wie geht auf die Protein, ist das lernt er allein.
The previous Rebbe writes about the Rebbe's father. In addition to his incredible knowledge in the revealed part of the Torah, he's also incredibly fluent in the works of Kabbalah, a deep thinker in Chabad Hasidic philosophy. He was a rare Yirei Shamayim, God-fearing person, and he was incredibly kind in giving Talmidus Torahs. At 36 years old, he took his first rabbinic position as a rabbi of the Dnepropetrovsk, a very cosmopolitan city in the Soviet Union.
Mir kommt der Prime Briefchen, der gut hat das nach von Sprache ist und ja angefangen die jene Zeit nach heute. Das ist doch nicht mit dem Roston, der gut die Masse der kann nicht auch nicht gerne nicht. Nach dem konnte ein Tanken gesagt war der Lady kann gut zu kaufen was daran geht. Daran geht die Tabak.
Reben startet genommen Melamdim von Reben, von den Brüdern. Und gleich die Melamdim haben nicht gehabt, was zu lernen. Wir haben eine bessere Melamed und weiter eine bessere Melamed.
The Bergerari was a neighbor of the Schneerson family, and he recalls discussing with his brothers how the Rebbe was learning through the night with his father, and only a couple hours later he would show up in Cheder with the other boys and put in a day of learning.
Und bis in den im Breger, als der Rebbe geblieben sitzt, in Stub lernen und der Melamed sein, der gewinnt der Tate sein.
Aziz Achrogel, Vishase Doa, Hilula, Yostis, Vekayetsi, der Monen Episayin, Bishem, und dem Baal Hilule, so wir benegehen, in Jonene, das nicht negehe. Was rettet wegen der Talmud, was sagt, benei, a viele, das Ben von Chemitz, Ben Yain, Geloschen Hashas, ist auf Pekin verspott mit zu der Monen und Madri sein. Adosi Bishmei, das Hakel jedem, Adosi genommen von dem Yain.
The Rebbe's father's style of learning was original, taking every detail of and finding a common denominator that weaves through everything.
Gesellschaft in der Aoris und der Rishimis und der Briefe seien gedruckt geworden von Baal Hailule, auf wie viel hat Medaille gewählt, auf Massen sein, auf zupassen, also so stimmen an jeder Eisdruck, so sein Eis gehalten mit Bisi, ein Leben von Sedes Atero, von Rosen der Reis.
Schreit namens Aschure 2, bringt aber die Gemora viele, Rashi, das bringt. Danach kann gehen Ariches von Kamo Blätter, als noch auf Kabole, wie sie stimmt. Der Name von dem Tanne, der Name von dem Amere und den Platz, wo es ist gewähnt und wenn es ist gewähnt. Und alles ist Kabole und sie stimmt, die Kol Zadok in Amamish. The Rebbe's style of all the sikhs was exactly the same thing. When the Rebbe would start for bringing a Shabbos, most of the time he would always connect right away. If it was a portion of the week, sometimes what's the day of the month, if it was Rosh Chodesh or the holiday, everything has to find a connection.
Und der Pfarrer sagt, was mit trifft sich zusammen in einer bestimmten Zeit im Woche, in einer bestimmten Zeit in Chedisch, in einer bestimmten Zeit in die Shiurim, in die Shiurim, was jeder hat sich in Lernen Teiro, ist Teus zu sorgen, aber das beschlossen Zufälligerheit. Nur so eine sichere Sache, dass es sicher bei Gocha Proti ist.
In 1927, the Rebbe leaves the Soviet Union with his future father-in-law, the previous Rebbe. And here begins a fascinating, years-long correspondence between father and son. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak writes to the Rebbe a Torah thought, often many, many pages. The Rebbe responds. And the father and son go back and forth, sometimes adding to what the other one taught, sometimes arguing, discussing, picking it apart. There are hundreds of pages going back and forth.
66 Brief, der Rebbe hat gemacht a Regime von den Brief, also sollt nach Teach, macht a Regime für jeden Brief. A Kitzer Mamisch, was redet sich in dem Brief, a Wort, Bishas, man geht sich a Tracht rein. Der ist der Erste, was hat sich gekocht in Rebenstel, was hat gelernt im Rebenstel, was hat gefragt Scheiles auf dem Rebenstel, was hat geschrieben Ores auf dem Rebenstel. Der Erste, was das getan, die werden im Rebenstel.
There's a letter from the Rebbe's father to the Rebbe in the 1930s, where he writes concerning your Torah thoughts, of which you wrote very humbly that there's nothing innovative or new in them. I disagree with you. They are very good and truthful and correct, but only one note: you need to include more spice, salt and pepper. With that, I mean the teachings of Kabbalah.
When the Rebbe's father was taken to jail, taken to prison, and then sent to Alma-Ata, Chile, Kazakhstan for 5 years, 1939 till the unfortunate passing of Chof of the 20th of Av, 1940. During those 5 years approximately, he had the 3 volumes of the Zohar and also a Tanya, and he had also very small Mishnayos.
Der Tatsache gewesen verschickt dahin zu Afghanen bekamen schon im Wald am Otes geteilt, seine Piulis in Apostel Ayadus, hat das nehmt an Kern der Meluch. Und dort in die gewähnt kein Tint. Die nach welchem in Sprache ist der Josse, der Mame, vielleicht gehen im Feld und es bleiben dort nach Sabi, nach seine Großen. Zusammenmischen da noch mit Wasser zu reinigen der Chulu und das sie gewähnt die Tint, wo dann noch der Tate geschrieben, die Chidushim, als wie sie nicht gewähnt, kein Papier, wird das geschrieben auf die Gilienis von des Sporin, wo sie bei ihm gewähnt, oder hat die gezählte Stücklich Papier, was gekonnt bekommen.
Wenn der sind die Tint und die Papier zu schreiben, schreibt jetzt, dass er zugehabt zu dem, mit der Liebschaft, als Sach mehr, wird er zugehabt zu die Breit, was gewinnt umgeht. Sein Leben gewinnt Tere, egal ist ein Tere. The longest piece that we have on a piece of Zohar, on Parshas Tzav, in our printing, it's 54 pages.
Und als ist gewusst, verlassen sich auf sie kommen, werden gebracht von anderen Sporen, worin sie gewähnt, die gewähnte Möglichkeit zugehen. Wie doch fühlt man sich mit Gehen zu einer Leiterin, mit Gita Guck, wie sie steht, in Sefer Gufe. Oder wie Schaas in des Sporen, was man hat allein, worin sie gewähnt, männlich, wie gezählte Sporen, wo die Mama gekonnt mit sich mitnehmen, weil sie dahin sie gefunden, worin hat geschickt mit einer Tat, das heißt, der Meister hat gekonnt mitnehmen, männlich, wie worin Achlochen bejeser, aber nicht als eine Sache wie es vorhin, weil das hat sich nicht gelegt, hat das darf man ihm lassen mitnehmen. Die gelegt sich bei die, was haben verschickt, hat das darf man ihm lassen mitnehmen.
Man ist bis 2 Wochen fahren die Stalkes. Hat Galt in ein Schreiben. Sie sagt, als einmal zu gesehen, als schreibt, hat sie gemeint, schreibt als Savoy. Sie zu einer guckt und sie gesagt, nein, schreibt weiter die Jone Kabbalah, die Jone Tere, hat ein Stückchen Papier, hat angeschrieben, was die kennt. Sagt sie, der Xavi gewinnt ein bisschen schwachere, doch gewinnt schwach, aber es gehalten weiter in den Schreiben.
Dennoch, ich gewinnt der Hemmschach Adab. Als noch der Ruf, wenn ist in die Stalle geworden, hat sie das mit sich mitgenommen. Und demut das gewinnt, Echet Hayini von Sakones Neposhes. Sie ist nachher gewinnt, verschickt mit dem zusammen, und ich habe es mir gefunden bei ihr Ksovim. Und wir wissen nicht, was und wer. In der Heile Reich, wie sie fühlt sich in jener Medine, ist das Parkett von Cheskes Kasches.
Sie hat mehr das Terroristen von Russland. Warum Tafshin Yotches ist gewähnt der Pinja Altis. Und hat gehört von ihr, die sich zu 2 sehr stark, sie kann das nicht stoppen. Und der Pinja Altis kommen in Israel. Jemals hat Israel gehabt diplomatische Verbindungen mit Russland. Man hat das gebringt zu der israelische Konsulat in Russland. Und sie haben es rübergeführt mit der diplomatischen Mail zu Israel. After that, every yard site of his father, he would make a gathering. He would always mention something of his father's teaching.
Also wie es war, das ist verbunden mit der Lule von Tatmut, so gedacht, ohne mit der Linie von Atere von Bala Hilula.
In 1969, in the honor of the 25th yard site, Rebbe gave the green light that he wants that they should start printing his father's writings. And in a few years, all the writings that we had were printed. And it came out to 5 books. Torah's Levi Yitzchak.
Dus je komt naar tijd, wat de Rebbe gebrengt in de Mamorim, den Taten Steres, als een heilig van Teres Achsidis. Diese hat namens mir erst gewinnt eine ganze Meimer auf dem. In die Jahren später hat der Rebbe genommen, mehr wahr sein, die Dei Shavua be Shavua, jede Woche, jeder Shabbos, die verbringen, hat der Rebbe mehr wahr gewinnt, ein Ingen, Lekut Levi Yitzchak, verbunden mit die Pasche.
Der Kirche nee, da versorgen Adina Nechit in dem Tatus Aoris Abseher. Da so was mir gehabt, nicht Kind, nicht Papier, was ich schreiben, gedacht schreiben, Agile Naseer, mehr nicht, mit Worten am Mochloch in die Jesse.
Rabbi Zachana writes how there were thousands of pages of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak's writings. When he was arrested, they were left in the home, and eventually the Nazis came through and they disappeared.
Ich habe es geschickt von der Zesroel, ich habe es gefunden.
Jeden geschrieben,
Ich handle mit den alten Sachen. Ich habe es gefunden mit der Quelle, mit der Gnise.
Das sind nicht genau die Sachen, dass er nicht Kachadosh,
Each time a new writing of his father was found, the Rebbe worked to publish it and considered it part of his honor and respect for his father.
The Rebbe sent out a letter to many shluchim around the world that it's my obligation. Alai hachoiv v'aschus godel levakesh ulatzia, that they should learn my father's Torah on the day of his yahrzeit.
Jasher keer von die was haben Mechaven gewählt. Und tegen ongejagt, am Tag gedruckt, Mechoder, dem Taten Sefer Abseher. Und sie geworden fertig und eingebunden und gebracht ein Herz zu die Israelis. Und hoff, oh.
This production is made possible through the generosity of the members of the GEM Foundation.
Okay, so thank you for joining me for that presentation. I'd like to discuss that and share some thoughts and reflections on the actual presentation. Obviously, any questions are very warmly welcomed. I'd like to also welcome Harvey Barnett. Nice to see you, Harvey. It's been a while. Haven't seen you face to face in a while. Keith, nice to see you. And 208962. Welcome. Good. So it's first and foremost, it's very striking just to point out, this week was the Rebbe's father's yahrzeit. Today's the 24th day of Av, but 4 days ago was the 20th of Av. And in 1944, that was the day that the Rebbe's father passed away in Alma-Ata in Kazakhstan, where he was exiled by the communists. Can you imagine where that is? Alma-Ata is like on the border of China and Russia. It's like the middle of nowhere. It's called Almaty today, Almaty, Alma-Ata. And what's fascinating is that this week, an envoy of President Donald Trump met an envoy from the president of Kazakhstan at the Rebbe's father's grave this week on the day of the yahrzeit. It was on Sunday night. And they declared the site of the Rebbe's father's burial a World Heritage Site that's protected both by the Kazakh government as well as by the United States government. So it's really quite touching to see that the Rebbe's father received this posthumous recognition as an honored American site through the work of his son, obviously through the Rebbe, so many years after his passing, even though it was in 1944. But I'm sure that was something that would have given the Rebbe tremendous nachas. But something very unusual is you notice the extraordinary honor that the Rebbe gives to his father, even after he passed away. The degree of sense of seriousness that the Rebbe invested in studying and in finding the writings of his father and making sure that they were studied and teaching them and printing them. I actually was fortunate enough to have someone send me, someone anonymous. I didn't even know who it was. I can't thank anyone. send me the 5 volumes that you saw over there of the Rebbe's father's teachings. About 3 weeks ago, they arrived in the mail. I don't know who sent them to me, so I don't know who to thank, but I'm very much looking forward to studying them. Now, the story basically goes that the Rebbe was born in Nikolaev, but the Rebbe grew up in Yekaterinoslav, which is today Dnipropetrovsk. Today, that city of Dnipropetrovsk is the site of the world's largest Jewish center. The largest synagogue Jewish center on planet Earth today is in Dnipropetrovsk. They have a building called the Menorah Buildings. It is 7 buildings, 7 skyscrapers in the shape of a menorah in the city of Dnipropetrovsk. I know because I was there when my first cousin married the Chabad rabbi's daughter over there. It is the site of the most unbelievable wealth. These oligarchs, one after the other, after another of oligarchs that literally are the board members of the Chabad of Dnipropetrovsk, and they built this most magnificent, exquisite Chabad house, just 7 skyscrapers called the Menorah. Now, it was there that the Rebbe's father was rabbi until he was sent into exile. He was sent into the KGB, and you see the building where he was detained there in Dnipropetrovsk, until eventually they sent him in 1939 for 5 years to Almaty, which is where his life ended. And to see his love of Torah is also unusual. You know, that he had no books, and the few books that his wife was able to bring him, the Rebbe's mother, he wrote with the ink that she made on the sides of the books. One day when you come with me to Crown Heights, we'll go to the Rebbe's library, where you can actually see those books on display behind glass. You see the Rebbe's father's writings with the green and red and purple and pink ink that she made with those glosses that this genius of a mind was able to put together. But one thing I would like to share with you is something which to me is so very meaningful, is the style of learning of the Rebbe's father, which the Rebbe totally adopted. And that is a holistic approach to Torah, something which the Rebbe evolved into a holistic approach to life in general. You see, the way that the Rebbe's father looks at Torah is one essence that expands into every single detail of whatever you're studying. So if the Rebbe's father was learning a piece of Talmud, then the names of the characters, the location, the period of time, and the teaching that they were experiencing were all deeply connected. And he would teach the name, the meaning of the name, the meaning of the place, the meaning of some irrelevant detail that was taught in that story, how it all comes together based on one truth. You know, when the Rebbe taught, let's say, a teaching on Rashi, which is the super commentary of Torah, the Rebbe would ask 17 questions on the Rashi, like rip it apart. He'd take a piece of Chumash and literally rip it apart. Then the Rebbe would say one point, one seismic shift that would suddenly answer all 17 questions in one fell swoop. It was this most beautiful ability to study Torah with as if the lights are on. And I just want to illustrate that with an example. You know, we have the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. Have you ever thought about what the difference is between the two of them? If you want to say anything, please unmute yourself. Have you ever thought about the difference between the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud? Anybody here? Anybody want to chime in to the conversation? So the difference is that the Babylonian Talmud is full of questions and answers, back and forth and up and down and fighting back and fighting forth. But the Jerusalem Talmud is clear statements, one after the other after the other. There's much less arguments and contradictions and resolutions. The reason is because the land of Israel is the Jerusalem Talmud is the land of clarity, whereas the Babylonian Talmud was written in the diaspora, which is the land of spiritual darkness. In Babylon, in the diaspora, where there's spiritual darkness, we have to work much harder to come to clarity. We have to argue and question and answer and contradict and compare until we come to a resolution. But in the Jerusalem Talmud, it's clear, the land of Israel. So it's a difference of a man in a dark room trying to find the door, and a man in a room which is light to try to find the door. In a dark room, you have to grope around the walls until you feel your way through to the door. And when the light's on, you go straight to the door, you open the door and you leave. The Babylonian Talmud is the groping. The Jerusalem Talmud is going straight. And that is how I understand the Rebbe's way of learning and the Rebbe's father's way of learning, which is like the lights on, where you can go straight to the door, straight to the solution, and see how all the chips fall into place. You saw what happened when the Rebbe's father came to get his rabbinic ordination from a non-Hasidic rabbinic leader, the Rabbi of Brisk, who really didn't want to give him ordination, so he gave him a very hard time. But when he saw what a brilliant mind Reb Leivik was, he said, "You have such a brilliant mind, but and what are you doing with it? You're using it to study Kabbalah and Hasidism, which is obviously not the approach of the non-Hasidic world, right?" So you can understand his disappointment, but obviously it was his inability to comprehend the depth of the teachings of Reb Leivik and the wisdom of the Kabbalah. So that's really the way I understand the Rebbe's Torah, and for me, why the Rebbe really stands apart from all other Torah commentaries. You know, I always love to quote in my sermons all Torah teachers. However, it's very difficult to put them on the same scale, because when it's like comparing an Einstein to a Dr. Fauci. You know what I mean? I mean, with all due respect to Dr. Fauci, I'm sure he's a very good doctor, but he's no Einstein. You know what I mean? He's not an Albert Einstein. It's not the same thing. You know what I mean? With all due respect, I'm not trying to denigrate Dr. Fauci, but he just ain't no Einstein. And when you learn the Rebbe compared to other peers, it's like night and day. They're in the night and the Rebbe's in the day. It's the most extraordinary clarity, the most unbelievable depth. And when you study the Rebbe, it's the breadth of quoting from the entirety of Torah without leaving any stone unturned, something which you simply don't find in the writings and in the teachings of any other scholar. It's really something extraordinary, which you can only appreciate when you really studied the other works. And I think it's a good example of comparing Fauci to Einstein. With respect to Fauci, again, this is not a political statement. I think he might, I'm sure he's a good doctor, but he simply is no world genius, like unique in his generation, like Einstein was. Any thoughts or feedback or comments here, anybody? Questions? No questions. Keith, you look like you're thinking. No questions. All right, good. Okay, good. So, I mean, that's pretty much the presentation here. Let me see if I could just share with you today's Hayom Yom, just for a quick moment as we prepare for, prepare to sign off here. 1 second. Oh, oops, 1 second, wrong thing. Just a second. I'm going to bring today's Hayom Yom up, and here it is. Okay, so today's Hayom Yom goes as follows. It tells us a tradition handed down from Rebbe to Rebbe. During the well-known conflict between the Hasidim and their opponents, the people that felt that Hasidism was some sort of a sect, that Kabbalah should not have been taught in public, the Hasidim told the Alter Rebbe about the terrible abuse they suffered from the plain folk of the Misnagdim, of the non-Hasidic folk. And the Rebbe said, grandfather, who he used to refer to the Baal Shem Tov, even though it wasn't his actual grandfather, was his teacher's teacher, the Alter Rebbe said, grandfather deeply loved simple folk. In my first days in Mezrich, where I studied from my Rebbe, the Maggid said it was a frequent customary remark of the Baal Shem Tov, of the Rebbe, that love of Israel is love of God. You are children of Hashem, your God, is what it says in the verse. When one loves the father, one automatically loves the children, right? It's a very beautiful approach to how the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, viewed fellow Jews, even those who were deeply opposed to his teachings and were abusive to his disciples. He said, look, these Jews are the children of God. And when you love God, you love the children. So even though the children are abusing us and they're being nasty, yep, you've got to love them deeply. Was somebody saying something there?
No, it's Harvey. I was clearing my throat, but I do have a comment, but I don't want to interrupt you when you're done.
Okay, so the idea here is the ability. It's very consistent with what I was saying before, that the Alter Rebbe was looking at these abusive fellow Jews. Now, an ordinary Jew would say this behavior is unacceptable. They were literally physically abusing the disciples of the Alter Rebbe, the early Chabadniks. And you'd think a normal person, any one of us, would probably write them off, But the depth of vision, of clarity of vision of the Alter Rebbe was such that he was able to see these Jews and say, look, deep down, they're fellow Jews. And in fact, they're the children of Hashem. And since we love Hashem, we love his children. Right? That's how the Rebbe the Alter Rebbe had this penetrating vision to see to the heart and to the essence of every single Jew, no matter what. And I challenge you, if you can do that to a Jew who's on the opposite side of your political aisle. So if you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump, and you got a brother-in-law that is on the opposite side of that, right? And you think that this guy has just fell off the deep end and is impossible to talk to, and he's just gone mad. Are you able to have the same penetrating vision as the Alter Rebbe has, that we're called to do in Tanya, which is to see the soul within, to see the essence, the godly essence within them, and to realize that they too are a child of God, and if I love God, I love all of his children. Go ahead, Harvey.
So back to the Rebbe's father. I've met quite a few people from my Soviet Jewry experience who were in the Gulag, been sent to the Gulag, Siberia, places like where his father was. And it always struck me, and most of them were very religious people, how they were able to survive based upon their faith. When Sharansky was in jail, in exile, not exile, was in jail, solitary confinement, and he studied. And he wrote later in his books that he felt he was free mentally, and it was really the prison guards who were in prison, not him.
Yeah.
And as you know, we heard from Mendelevich about what he felt. And the Rebbe's father, this is fascinating to me, took it to way beyond almost what anyone else did. Used the Gulag as a place to flourish in many respects in terms of his writing and his studies. And I think it shows what faith can do for a person.
That's a very beautiful example how the Rebbe's father was in this horrible exile. It was disease and there was no food. And I can't even imagine what life must have looked like in Alma-Ata in 1944. But yet he was a different person when he studied the Torah and when he was able to write the Torah. And how fortunate we are to be able to have the Torah at our fingertips at any moment in time from anywhere we are now. This is a new recent invention that we can study Torah just as good as we did before from any remote location, like I am in the Catskills right now. And how lucky we are. Indeed, the Torah says that there is no such thing as a free person except for one who studies Torah. And that's such a profound statement from Sharansky to say that he was the free person and the prison guards, they were the prisoners, because I have access to Torah, which is godly wisdom, and I'm able to free my spirit, but they are trapped as prisoners of the regime. Beautiful point there. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I'm delighted to be able to share with you to introduce to you the Rebbe's father, someone who obviously had a profound impact on the Rebbe himself, and who was probably his greatest supporter and admirer, certainly in the earliest days. When my niece just got engaged a few days ago here in New York, we had a Zoom engagement party. So I brought in on Zoom her parents, future parents-in-law from Paris, and my parents from South Africa, and the whole family was on Zoom. There was very, very few of us in the room. And it was very interesting because the groom's name is Menachem Mendel, the same as the Rebbe. And his parents' names are exactly the same as the Rebbe's parents' names, Levi, Yitzchak, and Chana. And I was saying that just like at the Rebbe's wedding, his parents were not able to be there. They said they were in Dnepr Petrovsk when the Rebbe was getting married in, I think it was in Warsaw, where the Rebbe got married. They had a small wedding party in their apartment in Dnepr Petrovsk. Same thing was when my niece and nephew got engaged. His, the same name as the Rebbe, and his parents having the same names as the Rebbe's parents. They also were like in exile, at least, but now they were able to zoom into the party to be able to experience it at least that way. In any event, it is a great privilege and an honor for us to be able to study the Rebbe's teachings, to study the Rebbe's father's teachings. I look forward to exploring them further myself now that I have the texts. And that's it. That's a wrap. So that concludes today's Torah study, folks. Thank you very much for joining me here today. I'm sorry that we had a problem with Facebook. It looks like moving forward, we're going to have the Facebook replaced by YouTube. It looks like we're going to have to, because even last night we had the same problem. We couldn't stream Zoom to Facebook. So if you look closely at the sheet that we send out in Friday afternoons in the email, where it has the list of all the Torah classes and the links, you'll be able to notice where the daily Torah study is taking place. It's probably going to be more on Zoom, more on YouTube than it will be on Facebook, especially when it's zoomed at the same time. But I do want to tell you that we have daily minyan every day at 7:45 a.m. That one is on Zoom. We'd love to have everybody join us on Zoom. Should we do the Sunday minyan at 9 a.m. as well, Mickey?
Yes.
We might as well, right? Oh, that's Ron. There he is. Now we know who 208-962 is. Ron.
Well, that's me. I'm 208-962.
Fine. So we'll do the minyan on Sunday. On Sunday, 9 a.m. and the weekdays at 7:45 a.m. I think it's a good idea to do that. 9 a.m. on Sundays and 7:45 on weekdays. And we study on Zoom and on YouTube. It looks like. So we'll look out for the daily Torah schedule. And with that, I'd also like to invite everybody tonight for 7 o'clock to join us on Zoom for the pre-Shabbat Farbrengen. Last week we spoke about Zoom and Minyan. Any particular topic you want to Farbrengen about tonight at 7 o'clock? Any suggestions for Farbrengen tonight?
I want to make one addition, because in listening to all about the Rebbe and our previous ancestors and that area in where you said, in truth, Tanya tells us, in truth, the source of all creatures is constantly within them. It's the Hashem that's within them. And it's our failure to perceive them, to perceive this wonderful piece of God that's in all Jews. So we have to learn. If we don't agree, we learn. That's
right.
What we
so that's the vision, the depth, the essence that we're called upon to see within, within every single thing that exists, certainly within our fellow human beings, to find the godliness within them. And even beyond that, to find the godliness within every single creature that exists. Go ahead, Ron. Thank you very, very much, everybody. It's great to see everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. We'll see you later today at 7 o'clock on Zoom and back again on Sunday morning for the Minyan. Thank you very much, everybody. Over and out. Shalom. Have a wonderful day.
Everybody.
Shalom. Shabbat shalom.
Bye, Adrian. Shalom, everybody. Thank you.